We're going to have to improvise here. Okay, thank you.
My name's Kendasi, and thanks to this gentleman, I'm present. Not a question, but comments.
Great, great.
I don't see anybody else here of color or age or whatever. Thank you. So I just want to add something to what I've witnessed and enjoyed tonight. Openness. First of all, regarding to the last speaker, I never use the word senior. I use the word mature. And okay, and that has a big opening, because the word senior has so much baggage and everything to it. But when you use the word mature, you know, like wine or whatever, it opens the mind to a different way of looking at things. Now I'm going to ask you at the end how old you think I am. But I am mature. I never use the word senior. And the word, you know, openness. You talked about, the last speaker talked about the traditions and the way that people are regarding moving into sexuality as you mature. But when we are open in our minds, we not only embrace it and allow it for ourselves in our mature ages, but we also are giving it to our younger generations, which is very important. So we don't only have to think about, you know, encounters with people at our age group, but as we allow people that are younger to think about poly or different types of omniaction between the genders, between the emotions and between the feelings. We bring them into possibilities, greater possibilities. And so that's something that I just wanted to say. I looked at some of the charts and everything, and there were certain ones that I could completely identify and reinterpret, because we can interpret them from, you know, a staid place in time, or from a more open place of possibilities. And that's what we're really all talking about here. Expanding possibilities for omniaction, human interaction. And so I just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
Since you...
Oh, I forgot.
Oh,
I'm 68. Okay. You know, and I have been celibate. Not by choice.
Yeah.
Not by choice. For a long time. But because, you know, it's not about
Sex, that's the thing about it. It's not about sex, it's about touch. I don't start myself as a human. I start myself as an animal. And one thing that all animals enjoy is touch. Okay? So when we start from that premise first, and that understanding of ourselves as beings, plants, you know, I had this thing, if I walked by a plant and a plant kind of just touched me, I said, oh, you wanted to touch me. You know, and I noticed that. Touch. First. Simply touch.
I wonder if you could just add to that you can give that to whoever the next question is, but I wanted to add to that it's certainly true for a lot of older people that touch becomes as important as sex, if not more so.
and touch is a part of the arc of life.
Okay, so,
From your first baby, your child, all the way to, to if you're there at a deathbed. It's touch, more so than sex. So if we ground ourselves in that first and foremost, that's a wholesome beginning and grounding from which, all other kinds of stuff.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question for the first speaker, and remind me your name, Nisa?
Nisi.
Nisi. My name's Frances. Great, thank you for your presentation. I read a commentary by someone who the person identified as non-binary, gender fluid, gender queer, didn't give any more details about themselves, but talked about the difficulty making connections. The person was drawn to men or to testosterone-based life forms, and had so much difficulty finding a male-bodied person who would date them. It could find someone who would be attracted to them, but when it came to actually dating and forming a relationship and presenting in the world with the author on his arm, there was this disconnect. And I was wondering if you've run across that, because I was just fascinated and touched by this, because clearly this person felt that he or she was not looked on as dating material, as acceptable to the world. Just curious about you.
Sure, absolutely. That has come up for me personally, professionally, talking to folks where they're...
What are we doing wrong here?
I don't know. Oh, hey, we're back. Where there is a lot of different concerns. On one hand, wanting to be accepted for as you are. On the other hand, being really concerned about being fetishized, being really concerned about being hidden, being a guilty secret. That comes up really often, and something that used to be a source of meetups for the non-binary community, for the trans community, for the kink community, had been Craigslist Personals, and thanks to SESTA and FOSTA, that is no longer around, so fuck that shit, because it just made a lot of people's love lives and ability to express themselves unavailable, and that's an attack on all of us. So, yeah, that is absolutely something that comes up. I think folks who are non-binary, agender, all along the gender spectrum are doing such a really great job of writing blog posts, of speaking out, and really holding some firm boundaries about how they're treated, about being dating material, more so than sex material, and it's just really inspiring to see.
I'd comment on that. I am married to a transgendered man for 24 and a half years, and my oldest child is transgendered. So I have the perspective of two transgendered men, 120, 152. And what I would say is the experience of my child as a transgendered person, we're not in the Bay Area, we're south of here, is the inclusiveness blows my mind.
Yeah.
My husband and I were a lesbian couple for 15 years before he transitioned. I dated a trans man in the late 80s, which was like unheard of in the late 80s. And so the experience of having been in a stone butch femme partnership for 15 years and then now with a very passing transgendered man, what we have gone through, my kid just looks at us like, that's so weird, why are you talking about that? That's not my experience. They took a trans girl to the prom. The language of the youth blows my mind on so many levels. And I am really binary, being partnered to somebody who very much identifies as male. We had this very, my generation of trans people was very like, I'm almost 50. And then what I see with my oldest child is just this total freedom and acceptance of, you know, we came out to them as poly when they were, whatever they were, younger. We have 5 kids, but younger. And it was like, okay, what's the big deal? Like, you know, mom, you're bi, like dad's trans, like you guys are poly. Like, it was sort of like, you're not cool, like everybody is that. And we were like, okay, good, because, you know, our experience has been like, we're on the fringe of everything. And their experience of us is like, whatever. So, okay, you're a little hipper than the average parent. So I'll just say that I'm excited for what this next generation, you know, the youth always take it one step forward.
Oh, yeah.
Interestingly, this person, the people that he had these experiences with of, you know, starting relationships and then getting ghosted or, you know, put aside, they were people who described themselves as pansexual, you know, non-binary themselves, but because this person doesn't present physically like, you know, I mean, a trans man presents to the world as a man. People don't, you know, it's a little different issue, and not to disregard what you're saying, but this is somebody who presents in a way where someone looks at him and says, what is he? Is he a girl or a boy? You know, and so there's that, you know, we're trying to create a world where hopefully gender won't matter as much, but I think even the young people are having struggles with this, and the social acceptability of how you present to the world.
And it's worse if you happen to be an old person in an institution. You can get very dissed by your colleagues if you are institutionalized.
Yeah. Yep. To add to that, the seniors in my support group, a lot of them have gone back in the closet after decades of being out because the housing that they were able to find, again, we come back to housing, was ultimately just, they needed housing more than they needed to be out. And they needed to move through their housing in a way that did not make them targets. And so a lot of them report this sort of return to their teenage years of being closeted, which is just so heartbreaking.
I do have a question. I'm super millennial. And also super, I don't want to say curious, but I'm trying to educate myself in this because my partner is polycurious. We talked about it about 5 years ago when we first started a relationship, and then though over time we started practicing being monogamous, and kind of like both of us actually stepped out of our relationship, not intentionally, but we've had, you know, made some mistakes, and then we're like, oh, we're gonna see other people, what is that like? But not really want to leave each other. So I would like to know what advice you can give to someone, especially a couple who has practiced monogamy for the 5 years and interested in trying to see what even kind of polyamory would we try to figure out or try to get, like, would we have whatever. You get it, thank you. And then a part of that is I know that I'm struggling with not being enough, and then but still trying to define what the primary is, like what that definition would be for me if we do practice polyamory. Thanks, everyone. Sorry, multiple questions.
Any particular person want to address that? That could be a long discussion.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. So my biggest advice for you is go slow. And before you really involve another person, just be sure that that's where you want to go, because you don't want to treat another person like they're an experiment. And after a couple months go, oh, sorry, that didn't work out, see ya. So just go slow, be sure that the other people that you're involving are aware that you guys are new and we're testing, we're not sure. Just a lot of communication. And maybe you could just both have a brainstorm, read some books or blogs and have a brainstorm on what are some of the ways you might want to try to open your relationship, and start with the easiest, simplest thing. Come back, check in with each other. How did that feel? How did that work? Then the piece about not being enough, that's really huge, and I went through that. And for me, it was my spiritual work and my self-care. Commitment to self-love and commitment to meditation, and meditating on the Zen koan, who am I, is a huge tool for me to remember that I am part of the infinite love source, and that I'm perfect, and love is everywhere. And it sounds cliche, but the more you can tap into that spiritual energy, the less you'll be stuck in that ego place, because that's your old childhood wounds, our old childhood wounds that are telling us we're not enough, and it's not true. So just a regular practice of self-love and meditation, or whatever spiritual work you want to do. Hope that helps.
I would just also add that it would be useful to figure out, for both of you, to figure out, like, what is your motivation? Like, why is it that you want to be in some kind of open relationship? Because my experience is people are almost always looking for either more or different. Either they love everything they're getting in their relationship, but there's a scarcity of some resource. They love the sex, but there's not enough of it. Or they love the affection, but there's not enough of it. Or they love the emotional intimacy, but there's not quite enough of it. So they're looking for, to supplement that a little bit so that they'll be 100% satisfied. Or they're looking for different. They're looking for, say you're bisexual and you have a female partner, well, you're looking for a male partner to supplement that because that's something different that you can't get at home. Or you have a great sexual connection with your partner at home, but you don't have a lot of emotional connection, and you're looking for that from someone else. So it really can help to understand what is your motivation, what is your partner's motivation, are you on the same wavelength with that, and so that I think that can address the question of not being enough, feeling like, oh, well, there's some actual logical reason why my partner might want someone else, and it has nothing to do with my value as a person or my worthiness of being worthy of love. So,
Sure, yeah. Just a couple quick things. Don't expect things to be equal or fair all the time. It's just going to always look different. If you're not into ice cream, it's not taking anything away from you if someone goes to Foster Sprees with their sweetie. Like, it all sort of evens out, and it's chaotic, therefore it's never equal. And I guess the other thing is that there's going to be things that you think you're going to freak out about that end up not being that big of a deal. And
vice
also,
versa.
absolutely, things that you haven't even thought of that I guarantee you will be a landmine and an argument, and you'll be the better off for it afterwards.
I'll take a stab too, which is that you have a big, rich life ahead of you, as does everybody else in your generation. You have a limited amount of time on any given day. Relationships take time. Is it one of your priorities to really invest the time in one or two or more relationships, and vis-a-vis what? I mean, what are the other priorities in your life? Where does having a relationship or multiple relationships fit in when there are trade-offs ahead of you? And be honest with yourself and with your partner or partners. Maybe no relationship at some point is the most important thing for you. I don't know. It depends. And these things vary a lot, person by person and at different points in time. It's also the case that we happen to live in an area where there's like the Human Awareness Institute and other organizations that promote a lot of looking at relationships and how you can be including with yourself. We live in a good place and time for things like that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh,
Wait. Somebody is new.
She's
yeah.
You go first then. Okay, then pass it on.
So I recently newly opened my relationship. I've had a monogamous relationship for 7 years now. And one of the things that I'm noticing for myself that is arising is that, especially in the last few years of our relationship, I've really prioritized his needs a lot because he's been at a place in his life that has been really challenging. And I was, prior to opening the relationship, I was already realizing the necessity for me to really shift back in towards myself and my own needs and my own life direction and life path. And then recently, asked to open our relationship, and I'm already sensing and feeling into potential future scenarios where I might have a need or desire to spend time with someone other than him or do something, with my lover, and how to navigate that scenario where I have a clear need or desire to do something that might be hard for him and that might, be triggering for him. And as someone who's also been, as I think many women experience, indoctrinated with the people pleaser, how to deal with that conditioning of really working to not prioritize his needs, or if he's having a hard time with my desires, and how to navigate that territory, if that's
Well,
clear
I'm sure
enough
Nisi
question.
has something to say, but I'll first just say that you don't know how he's going to respond to what you need. And so your job is to be on the same team with him and share from your heart, here is what I desire. Here is what I hope for. And how does this land for you? And have a negotiation about how you can get what you need in a way that he feels the most respected and honored. And then you work together to achieve that goal. And don't go in with the assumption that, oh, this is going to trigger him. You don't know that. That's your codependency. So, but good for you for noticing that's going on. And it does take courage to break out of that pattern. And I just have a guess that you might have something to say. No? Okay.
You said it so much better than I could.
Yeah, I would underscore that and say, don't assume that you know what your partner needs and wants. Ask for 100% of what you want, but be prepared to explain that this is a request, not a demand, and find out what they actually want and try to meet them in the middle, one way or the other. And as Sumati said earlier, go slowly. And I think it's a good idea for any couple to consider, seeing a coach or a therapist who has some expertise that can help you negotiate some agreements and boundaries. And it's great to have an actual verbal or written agreement about what you're trying to do and what's okay and what isn't. And then you're going to change that over time as you try things and find out what works for you.
One more thing. So I think it's a good idea, unless your partner asks for otherwise, to share early and often when you start to feel an attraction to somebody. And talk to your partner about this. Do you want to hear this right away when I first notice a spark with somebody, when I first have an interest in somebody? Or would you rather just not hear? Because everybody has different needs. But most of the time it's helpful for your partner to know, hey, I had a really sexy dance with this person at this party and I'm kind of interested in going a little farther, and I just want to let you know there was a spark there. So it doesn't come as a surprise that all of a sudden you're going on a camping trip with someone when he doesn't even know there was anything happening. That can soften it a little bit. Yeah. Miles.
Microphone.
Would you pass it?
Yes, you do.
Could you please share with us guidance you've heard other coaches say that you totally disagree with?
I shared the one thing about how sometimes polyamory can actually fix part of a relationship that might be broken. It's not always true that polyamory can never work unless the relationship's in perfect shape. So that was one thing. Anything else?
Yeah, I would agree with that too, that there are some problems polyamory can solve and some that it can't. If you're completely incompatible with your partner, it's not going to fix that. But if your issue is scarcity, as I was saying earlier, people are either looking for more or different. If the issue is scarcity and you are happy in your relationship, but your partner doesn't have enough time for you because they work too much or they're going to law school or something, or if your partner just doesn't have the same sex drive as you, or they just need more alone time than you, or any number of reasons. Polyamory is great at causing problems. Yes, it does that too. It's great at solving problems that are based on scarcity of a particular resource in your relationship. So I also, the advice I hear often that I totally disagree with is that you're supposed to have some kind of relationship with your partner's partners. You're supposed to be nice to them and be friends with them and hang out with them and all that. And I always say that is just ridiculous. If my partner has a girlfriend, it's like, it's your girlfriend. She's not my girlfriend. Yeah. So, like, I don't have to hang out with her. I don't have to even like her. All I have to do is just not sabotage your relationship with this person and facilitate you being able to have a relationship with them. I think a lot of therapists and coaches give this kind of advice that you're supposed to be cultivating a relationship with your partner's other partners. And I've certainly seen some people go to great lengths to try to develop a friendship, and then suddenly your partner's breaking up with them, and you've just spent like a year developing this friendship. Now what are you going to do? You're going to stay friends with them now that your partner has dumped them? Anyway, do you have any thoughts on advice?
Yeah.
That's not a love, that's a feature.
A couple quick things. It's okay to go to bed angry. There is such a thing as too much processing. And really timing, like taking time outs, tapping out, that's going to help, especially if you can say, we're going to come back to this in about 25 minutes, in an hour, but our nervous systems are on edge, we're both activated. In our reptile brain, a tiger is chasing us right now, and we cannot have a productive conversation. Let's take a walk, let's smoke a bowl, let's do whatever we need to do to chill the fuck out, and then we can revisit this. Best thing you could do in the middle of a heated discussion.
I'm going to go back to basics, which is that we have poly-friendly therapies in this area, but it's still very edgy in the world of therapy in general and in the world of social work, to even go beyond the model of a monogamous couple. And there are lots of people who are affected by that still. And you'll see a lot of literature that's both monocentric and heterocentric, and it continues. It's not trivial. I mean, we are a small minority at the moment, so that is certainly something I can disagree with. Furthermore, I am told, I haven't checked this out yet, that the Gottmans, who are especially in couples therapy and have a lot of evidence and a lot of good work behind them, have just now come out, or at least he has come out with a statement against porn in relationships, which strikes me as, I'm sure I know there are cases where it can be detrimental, but broad statements like that I disagree with too.
And this isn't necessarily what poly coaches say, but one of the common comments we get in general is that you poly people just process all the time. It's just full of processing. So I just want to reframe that we get to process it. Most common regret when people are on their deathbed is that they didn't spend enough time with relationships. So getting to talk about our feelings, our wants and needs is actually a gift. And it gives us an opportunity to talk about those things, whereas in monogamy, like I said before, it's easy to just sweep stuff under the rug, but polyamory kind of forces you to develop the courage to share what you really want and need. So it's a gift in that way.
The Gottman therapist team that you talked about, they're very heavily data focused.
Yeah.
So it'd be really interesting to see why they made that statement, what data they showed up.
Okay, anybody else? Because she already shared, but if no one else wants to share, oh, there's one over there.
I'm curious what kinds of stories you've seen of people who have committed to a poly lifestyle at a relatively young age. I know that we've heard some already. I'm reacting to, as someone who's relatively new in this world, what a lot of people I've seen basically mess around with poly for 10 years basically as a way of like accelerated dating, and then essentially going into a monogamous situation in their 40s or 50s once they have kids. And I want to take it more seriously than that, but I would love to hear more examples or ways you've seen people make that transition elegantly.
Make a transition from being monogamous to being poly, is that what you're saying? Or the other way around?
Actually, let me rephrase the question. Just poly while dating. Or rather, living lives while poly rather than passing through poly as a way of dating.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think before the word poly was invented, we did used to have this thing just called dating. You know, where you did date a lot of people, and then you eventually settled down with one of them and went on that relationship escalator of getting married, having children, and all that. It was a kind of a sorting process. It wasn't really anything like polyamory. Polyamory is a much more deliberate or conscious choice that you are going to be open to having more than one partner on a long-term basis. Doesn't mean you have to have more than one partner. It just means you're open to that idea if you happen to, run into somebody or more than one somebody that you want to develop something with. So I think a lot of younger people do confuse just dating with, oh, I must be poly because I'm dating more than one person. But it's not, I mean, that's just really a sifting and sorting process of trying to narrow it down to one person that you actually really like. Is that what you're talking about when people, quote, mess around with that for a while and then settle down? Yeah.
If you want some role models for people staying in poly through child rearing in particular, you should look for Elizabeth Sheff's book on polyamory families.
Are you talking about The Polyamorous Next Door? Is that, yeah. She also has another book called Life in the Polycule, where she has lots of different poly people each telling their own story about how they got into this and what worked for them and what didn't. And I mean, that Life in the Polycule is a very courageous book because you've got people some of them are telling the most heartbreaking stories of how it just totally blew up in their faces and didn't work. So they're not trying to paint a rosy picture of it, but there are a lot of success stories in there as well.
And she got kicked out of the university that she taught at while writing that book. Because of that book.
Say it again?
She was a professor at a school, I believe, in Atlanta, and was lost her, I think, she wasn't tenured yet, and lost her position while writing that because it was so controversial.
No, I didn't know that. Do you have?
No.
Okay, real quick.
Attention. Paying attention. All of them have given some really great guidelines and aspects of how to interpret your experience. But slowing down and being in the moment and paying attention and asking questioning. What is what I'm experiencing? What is this or whatever? And then being open to seeing what evolves. So time and openness of space that allows the pure value of these relationships to evolve, to come up. I think that's important.
Thank you. I wanted to add one other thing to what this young man over here was asking about. I think it's important to recognize that polyamory is not for everybody, and it's going to make some people extremely unhappy, and oftentimes you can't figure that out until you try it. But if you already know that you're someone who, for you, sexual and romantic exclusivity is a requirement of feeling loved, safe, and really feeling that you can trust your partner, then polyamory is probably not for you. And some people do know that just on an instinctual level. And I have to say there are some people that just seem to be polyamorous as a sexual and relational orientation. It seems to be an innate orientation. And then there are some people that just are innately monogamous. They will never be happy in any kind of polyamorous relationship. But my experience is that the majority of us are in between. We're the bisexuals of the polymonogamous spectrum, and that under certain circumstances, at certain times in our lives, and with the right person or persons, we can be happy being poly, and with the right person and the right circumstances, we can be happy being monogamous. So it behooves all of us to figure out where we are on that spectrum and whether it really is for us, and sometimes you just do have to try it to find out. So you had a question.
Can I just add one thing to that? I've interviewed 2 young women on my radio show who recommend to their young clients in certain circumstances to try dating other couples for a while, just to experience what it's like to, be in the middle of a healthy relationship. If you come from a dysfunctional family and you've never actually seen a functional relationship happening, if you're a young woman, it's pretty easy. You're a unicorn, Go and get into a relationship and see what it's like, and experience that for a couple years to get some great tools. Even if you aren't oriented toward poly and you ultimately want a monogamous relationship long term, it can actually be a tool as long as the other people are consenting to that they know it's not forever.
Sebastian.
Oh, okay. First, I just want to express my gratitude for this space and the opportunity to participate in something like this. I'm a recent Bay Area transplant from the great state of Texas, so I can't even fathom having an opportunity to do that there. As well as I want to applaud everyone.
Hey, Austin, it's pretty good community there.
It's true, it's Berkeley, the South. And I also just want to applaud everyone here for our own variation of unapologetic and creative self-expression. It's a really huge testament to just where we are as a collective. And so for me, I find myself kind of wavering between periods where I want monogamy, and then I'm also very playful and in a very polyamorous space. And by nature, I do consider myself more poly and more free-spirited and very connected with the idea of just non-possessive, boundless, like infinite love. And the way that I approach poly is I do believe that we can absolutely love more than one person at the same time and be able to share that free flow of energy. And so, but sometimes I find a hard time distinguishing between it's like, I can't tell if it's my own ego sense of self-importance that's convincing me that I want monogamy, like I want to be the queen and to have 100% of the affection and the care and the support and like to be, absolutely cherished and adored. And then at other times, I'm like, but it just makes so much sense to free love, and that's such a pure expression of love. And so I'm curious as if anyone else has kind of found themselves in a similar situation and kind of how you've navigated those waves. I'm just open.
Yeah, they do use the term free love in the intentional communities that are sex positive and poly-friendly in Portugal and Germany. There's the Zeg community in Germany and the Tamara in Portugal, and they use the term free love instead of, we're using the term polyamory or ethical non-monogamy. They call it free love. So it's a model because it also acknowledges people that are asexual, that want to have loving relationships with no sex, whereas monogamy and non-monogamy kind of imply that sex is an inherent part of the relationship. So free love is an even more inclusive term. So I like the energy of what you said.
It's wonderful to have the sense that you're totally loved by somebody. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's also nothing wrong with wanting to have more love than having it limited to one sexual partner. You love your parents, your grandparents, your children. There's lots of people. Love tends to be unlimited in potential. How much time you want to have cuts both ways. When you've spent a lot of time with a devoted person, you may find that you want to spend somewhat less voluntarily with them because you get, bored of spending all the time. You know their patterns and so on. So there's nothing wrong with, having that feeling too. You have a rich, complicated personality, as does everybody else, and sharing that with more than one person is a wonderful thing too. I don't know that there's an inherent contradiction in those two things that you set up.
In my experience, there's always going to be some of that tension that you described, the tension between wanting freedom and wanting to give your partner freedom, and the desire to feel like somehow you have control over the situation and that things are safe. And there's always going to be that tension to some extent. It does get easier and easier for most people if they are actually capable of being polyamorous. It gets easier as your partner does sort of go off and spend time with someone and they keep coming back. And as long as they keep coming back, you start getting a little more of a sense of security. But I also think part of that tension exists because oftentimes people decide to open up a monogamous relationship without realizing that you are in fact losing something and giving something up. They're thinking about what they hope to gain, like, oh, great love and sex and all these wonderful romances. But, sexual and romantic exclusivity is a precious gift that you've chosen in a monogamous relationship to give your partner. And you're choosing in a poly relationship not to have that. And so you're giving that up. And it is a big thing to decide to let go of. And I think that creates a lot of anxiety and stress, tension, etc. But you're only willing to let go of that gift of exclusivity if you feel pretty convinced that it's going to actually improve your relationship in the long run, and that you're going to be getting more than what you're giving up, that it's going to be worth it. It's going to be a worthwhile sacrifice because you're going to get something even better.
So this is tangentially related to your excellent question, but my Midwestern is coming out, and I wanted to welcome you to the Bay Area. And I want to welcome anyone else who has moved here recently, as well as I want to welcome folks who are curious about this way of life, folks who are just trying this out. I'm so glad you made it out tonight. I'm so glad you're being so brave and curious. And if any self-righteous, really experienced folks give you hell or grief, or if they're impatient with you, let me know and I'll give them a talking to.
Okay, I know they're going to throw us out of here pretty soon, but does anyone have any other questions before we can wrap it up? Okay, well, I'm going to be here until they throw me out of here, so if anyone wants to ask a question privately, I'll be here. I don't know about the rest of you guys, for a little bit longer until they tell us to leave. Thanks for coming.
Can we get another round of applause for our wonderful presenters? Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for coming, for sharing your lovely presence. And one of my intentions with Learn to Love is to connect you, the community, with people who are doing amazing work in the world. So I'm sure they all have plenty of time to just hang out and answer any questions you may have. Yeah, it's in the contract. So thank you, everyone, for coming. We're here every third Monday of the month, and have a wonderful night.